Sam Adair from the law firm of Graham Adair. I'm joined here today by my partner, Chad Graham, and we're here to talk about the H-1B Cap. And specifically, this video is designed for HR professionals, folks who work at companies who oversee immigration programs, who are looking for ideas and ways to implement and sort of maximize efficiency of your immigration program as it relates to the H-1B Cap. So thanks for being with us today. Chad, thank you for joining me as we talk about this. I think H-1B Cap season is possibly the most exciting time of the year for immigration professionals, but what do you think about that?
I think so. We just came through the holidays. A lot of people like that time of year, and I think it's pretty good too. But for us, this is when the year gets really exciting. So let's get into this.
Your sincerity rings through loud and clear on that.
The H-1B Cap, every year there's a congressionally mandated number of 85,000 new H-1Bs available, 65,000 in what we call the regular cap, and then an additional 20,000 in the advanced U.S. degree cap. So think of your master's degree, PhD people from a U.S. institution. Those are kind of the two that make up the 85,000. In years past, and I think we're going back to like the early 2000s, the last time the lottery was not run. So in years past, that cap was sort of open throughout the year, and then eventually, maybe in October or something like that, eventually the cap would be filled and no more applications for that year would be received. Since the early 2000s, there has been a lottery because more than 85,000 people have applied within the first week that cases are eligible to be received. So when we talk about a lottery, we got the H-1B Cap, then we got the lottery phenomenon, I would say, over the last decade.
I tend to remember actually back to like Thanksgiving of 2011. I was at a gas station somewhere on a family road trip when the cap was reached after October of that year. But yeah, it's been a long time that we've been dealing with this now.
Yeah.
What do you think the odds look like this year, Chad, in terms of H-1B selection in the lottery?
Yeah, it's interesting. The cap has been inadequate for a long time. I think we've been stuck with the 65,000 plus 20,000, again, going back maybe even 20 years. And so, there's been an ebb and flow over the years of the number of applications received. But I would say over the past 3 years, we've seen a real steep curve in the number of applications filed for the lottery. And so last year it was almost 484,000. So this year, with the economy sort of flattening out a little bit, it could be flat. We could get about the same, maybe slightly less or slightly more. We'll have to see. But the question I would have for you, Sam, is if you're someone who's thinking about doing this, is the H-1B Cap the best option? Or if you're a company who really needs somebody, what do you look at doing?
That's a really good question. I think that unfortunately in the U.S. immigration process, there are limited avenues for people to be able to get work authorization to work even on a temporary basis in professional positions here in the United States. And so as an immigration lawyer, I'm always looking for alternatives for clients to the H-1B. And there are some that are nationality based, like the TN, or what's known as the H-1B1. There's obviously the O-1 visa classification for individuals who have really high levels of qualification and pretty impressive credentials. But really, truly, I think that the H-1B in a lot of ways is the bread and butter of the US immigration system for professional workers. And so there's not really a good workaround around it, I don't think, for most individuals.
Yeah, and something that I thought was really interesting is 2 years ago when the lottery was run, a certain number was selected, then a second round was run, and I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, even a third round was run. And so then this past year, after the first selection was made, there were about 127,000 selected, which is weird to think of since there's only 85,000 available, and we should probably talk about what that means. But then a lot of people were wondering, well, are they going to run a second round? Are they going to run a third round? And the answer was no, they just ran that one. But, I guess a question a lot of people may have is, why did they select so many applications in that first round last year?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can't believe what I'm about to say, but I think this is actually an indication of an efficiency that's been achieved by the USCIS through this electronic lottery, where they're able to calculate how many of those H-1B applications that are filed are likely to be ultimately submitted under the count, and then approved. And so the fact that, the first year we had a few drawings happen, and then the second year, I think we also saw a little bit of that, but then last year they had one drawing because they knew how many they needed to select. And Chad, like, to give a little bit of credit to USCIS, what do you think about the efficiency of this electronic lottery system compared to what we used to do prior to that?
To be honest, I love it. I love when, technology starts to catch up, with USCIS. We've seen that they've started to accept more electronic filings. So I'm all for the technology. And one of the nicest things about this lottery is before the lottery, we had to prepare all the cases, start to finish, top to bottom. Companies had to pay for the whole case. Then those whole files were put into the lottery and ones were rejected. And of course, companies would get their filing fees back, but they wouldn't get that legal fee back. So it was more expensive for companies to file H-1B petitions. And now, it costs $10 to put somebody in, register them, have them run through the lottery. If they're not selected, you don't file a case at all. So, it's less of a burden on law firms in terms of the paperwork they need to file. It's less of a burden on companies in the amount of money that they're having to pay to file these cases. So I think it's fantastic. I hope we see more advancement in technology with USCIS.
And for everybody listening out there, I do want to point out one thing here. This is an example of an attorney who's actually making less money because of this electronic lottery system, but still praising the merits of this system. You probably won't see that many other places. So Chad, kudos to you for recognizing that.
Yeah, our business advisor would probably tell us to stop saying that out loud. Sam, should we talk a little bit about the timing?
Yeah.
What does the timing look like for the H-1B cap?
Yeah, you bet. I'd be happy to do that. So under the electronic lottery, we usually find out in late January what the filing window is going to look like for the electronic system. This year, we know that system will be open from noon Eastern time on March 1st until noon Eastern time on March 17th. So it gives us a little over 2 weeks to submit any cases through the electronic registration system that we need to. Those cases will then be given a number, and there will be a random lottery that's conducted. And based on what we saw last year, we were notified on April 1st of all the cases that were selected, or by April 1st. I think maybe it started a day before. But we were notified by April 1st of every case that had been selected in the H-1B lottery. And then from that point, we had 90 days to file the actual H-1B application with USCIS. In years past, as you alluded to, Chad, earlier, when we had to do a full preparation of a case, it took quite a bit of time to sort of run up to getting to that point where those cases were ready to file. Now, I think that we start collecting information from our clients right about this time of year into January, into February, so that we have all the information that we need so that we can start submitting those applications to the electronic lottery on March 1st. And then there's a little bit of coordination that needs to happen with our corporate clients to file those electronic lottery cases the first 2 weeks of March. But it's a much more streamlined process than what we used to see.
Yeah, and thinking about that timeline, I know the question on everyone's mind is the same as mine. If the registration process closes on March 17th and the announcement is made, at the end of March or early April, what's going on during those 2 weeks? I thought we were just praising USCIS for their technology. Are they like running on a DOS system, or what takes 2 weeks to run
I think that they actually have like a dot matrix printer set up in the basement over at the Department of Homeland Security that's cranking out just page after page of these entries. And then there's somebody who's cutting them up with, one of the old paper slicers from elementary school. No, I really don't. I don't have a good answer for that. But, compared to what it used to be, where we used to have to wait weeks and months to find out which cases were selected, I'll take that week and a half or whatever it is of waiting for these cases to be processed.
Absolutely. And, I think one of the things that's interesting is a lot of people are trying to game the system a little bit and improve their chances. I mean, if it's 127,000 selections out of, close to 500,000, the chances aren't that great. So I think a lot of people are thinking, well, maybe I can file multiple applications. And the way to do that is if you have multiple companies that are sponsoring an individual, that's okay. If a company files multiple applications for the same person, then all of those applications are going to be rejected. And so the person's actually going to be pulled out. So my guess is during that time, they're kind of doing some cross-checking and make sure there's no duplicates. And this is something I guess for companies to be aware of, is if you are sponsoring someone in this year's lottery, it's possible that they have, 2 or 3 other companies filing for them as well. And if, multiple applications are selected, they may be making a decision to go with your company or not. Now, the nice thing again is, if they are selected in the lottery under multiple companies, hopefully they're kind enough to make the decision on who they're going with before the company has to pay the full fee to the attorney to actually file the case with USCIS.
Yeah, that would be a generous thing. Chad, kind of speaking, I want to go back a little bit to the odds of being selected, because you've mentioned, there's the 85,000 with the 20,000 available for master's cap cases. What have you seen over the last couple of years in terms of selection percentages for clients who hold a U.S. master's degree or higher?
Yeah, and what we have is fairly anecdotal. It comes from our clients in the cases that we've filed. The nice thing about being in the master's or the advanced degree cap is that lottery is run first, and all those who are unsuccessful in that lottery then go into the regular lottery, so they get sort of 2 lotteries, let's say. And so the chances of acceptance last year, I think, were what, if your master's, like 35% maybe?
Yeah, that seems to be what I recall, is that, if you just look at the raw numbers, we would have expected about a 20% selection rate on all cases. But I think what we ended up seeing was, for those master's cases, somewhere in the 35% range. Other cases were slightly lower than that. But overall, I think that, what we saw last year was something in the 30% range.
Yeah, so not great odds. I mean, the nice thing is typically we can come up with a plan for individuals who don't make the lottery, whether they can extend their optional practical training through like a STEM extension, potentially having them get into another work category. Sometimes they'll even go back and get a more advanced degree. Like if they had a bachelor's, they'll want to get into that advanced degree lottery for the next time. So, I mean, there are options available. That's the nice thing. But yeah, we need more H-1B numbers. 85,000 just isn't cutting it.
Yeah, definitely not enough. Now, let's focus on just kind of a few practical considerations, I think. First, as an employer, as a company, what do I need to be doing? Who do I need to be considering for the H-1B lottery as we're heading into this season right now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And a lot of companies kind of struggle with this. Like, when should we kind of get the process started? I always say, getting started sooner is better. Pulling together the list of people that need to be included in the lottery. And so often that starts with, the people that missed the cap last year, who are still with the company and the company wants to file again. I would also recommend looking for people who are in TN status, where the company wants to have them on a longer term basis, potentially apply for the green card. Getting them an H-1B is a good idea. People who are in L1 status, particularly if they're from India or China, where the wait time can be longer to get an immigrant visa number. And so pulling those lists together are important. And then, of course, looking at new hires. Is there anybody I missed?
No, I think that is a pretty comprehensive list there. And yeah, definitely not forgetting the TNs and the L1s and the O1s as you kind of go into that process. I think it's really important. And then just kind of roughly, what information does a company need to have ready in order to move forward with an electronic registration? What do you recommend on that?
Well, and this is a question I guess I have, and maybe you know a little bit more about, but I believe companies need, like right now, what they can be doing is setting up their My USCIS account and adding names in there. So even though it's not a full registration, they can start to put the names and everybody in the system. But, in terms of like what they need after that, what would you say?
I think you're right. I think that beginning on February 21st, companies can start to enter that information into their My USCIS account. I think it's a really good idea for a company to have job description information, job title information, the employees, a copy of their resume so we know their educational background, and then also salary information, because I think it makes sense to do a quick assessment to make sure that this is a position that really qualifies for the H-1B, a professional position that requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree in a related field to enter into that profession. You want to make sure you're not going to have prevailing wage issues for the geographic area where the individual is going to be working. So I think like kind of those basic things will be something that's really helpful as you're working with your law firm to make sure that any case you're submitting in the lottery is ultimately going to be a case that has a high probability of being approvable. Is there anything else you would add to that?
I don't think so. I think that covers it. And like I said before, a lot of companies are wondering what they can do now. So I think getting those lists together, having their My USCIS account set up, and starting to add people in there is what needs to be happening now.
And then the only other thing that I would say, I think from an employer perspective, is once those cases are going to be uploaded into the system and ready to submit to the lottery, I think that you need to set up a time with your immigration lawyer where you're going to go through and basically conduct the digital handshake to get those cases submitted. You're both going to need to be logged into My USCIS at roughly the same time. And you want to just set aside a little bit of time to be able to go through and get each of your cases submitted. I think the time commitment here is pretty minimal, but certainly you're going to want to set aside a half an hour to kind of make sure that you get all of that done during that March 1st to the 17th window that we have.
Yeah, that's great. And the other thing I would add to that is, a lot of times the concern is, well, what if these people don't make the lottery? Should we have a plan? And the answer is absolutely yes. I don't know that plan needs to be developed right now. I think it makes a lot more sense to have the lottery run, and then, once we have the results of the lottery, those who are not selected, then we start to figure out what the game plan is for those individuals, set up calls with the employee, with their manager, with HR, to kind of make sure everybody's on the same page and that employee is going to be taken care of.
Yeah, one of the things that I always like to do, and I think it's advisable, is to like sort of go through that list and know who really this is their last chance to be submitted in the H-1B lottery based on their current work authorization or current status. Maybe have like sort of a preliminary email or communication with those people so that they know, hey, like this is kind of it. If you're not selected, we're going to work with you to come up with a plan. And I always like to have sort of their current work authorization expiration dates available so that I can kind of prioritize those cases, because if you have somebody whose work authorization is expiring in like May or June, you're going to want to get those applications submitted as close to April 1st as you possibly can. So I think kind of being strategic about who's on your list and who may be impacted if this is their last year, I think is really important there.
All right, Sam. So if we haven't missed anything else, I think let's go ahead and wrap this up for everybody. We appreciate you joining us. Our goal with these training segments is to be able to empower those involved in their company's immigration program to really sift through all the information, find the stuff that's important, and really boil that down so that it's something that can be understood and implemented and helpful to companies looking to have the best immigration program possible. Thanks for joining us.